right, I'm gonna call us to order at 5:03. And we'll start with our roll call. Terry Andrews.
Here.
Ira Roshatsky.
Here.
Betsy Kahn, I'm here. Gwen is not here and Armando is not here, so we are a quorum, the three of us. I'm gonna ask your indulgence that we have a little something that should have been on the agenda that we didn't notice, which is that we need to adopt the agenda. So I'm just gonna insert that here. But Mark wanted to say something about that, so Mark, go ahead.
Mark Mariscal. Mark Mariscal. Hi, Chris. Kylan's not here then, huh? I saw you sitting there. Yeah, I would like to ask if it's possible to move the two reports up for the Friends and the Foundation. Actually, right before public communication, if that's okay, because I do know Cynthia needs to leave. I mean, I can stay a little longer, but if that's possible, thank you.
Okay. Any other comment on the adoption of the agenda? In that case, I would like to ask for a motion that we adopt the agenda with the change that item 13, reports of the support groups, go right before item 3, public communication. May I have a motion?
I'll move that we do that with that amendment.
I'll second.
Okay, moved in second, and everybody in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. With that, we will go ahead and ask for our support group reports.
Good evening, Cynthia Carmona, President of the Library Foundation. So I have 3 things to report. The first one being that we did have our Taste of Dina event, and it was very successful. We raised about, I would say a little under 8,000 over what we raised last year, so we are very excited about that. So thanks to everybody who came and donated wine and purchased tickets. We were really excited about it, and we are looking forward to getting an early start for next year. An even earlier start for next year. Second thing to report is that we actually had our retreat this last weekend. Terry was there as our liaison, and had a really great conversation. As I think you all know, most of the board members, all of the board members are fairly new. So it was a really good opportunity for us to get to know each other, talk a little bit about what our hopes are for the library. We heard about foundation history from Sharon Sand, who's a former president of the foundation. And we got to talk about what our major goals are for kind of the coming next few months and year. And thanks to Brian Beery, who's here, who helped facilitate that. So thanks, Brian. And then the third thing is we do have some folks coming up on their terms for the Library Foundation. So we are currently accepting interest from folks who are interested in joining the foundation board. So if you are interested in joining the foundation board, you can hit up any of us that are on the foundation. Myself, Mark, Kushan Bell is actually heading up our nominations committee, so she's another good person to reach out to. But those are the 3 big topics.
Thank you, Cynthia. Mark.
Mark Mariscal, Friends of the Altadena Library. So on October 7th, I think it was, we had the book sale, and it was wasn't sure about the weather, a little bit of rain. The staff had to cancel the chalk art, but it really worked out well. And again, the staff really made a difference on helping with the adjustment of the tables and all the different things, and having the costumes move in here. We were still able to get people to come outside in the wetness and buy books. Granny, I think, were you cashier the whole day? I mean, it was October 13th because it was I got back that night from my Spain trip. So anyway, it was a good one. Our next book sale is with Christmas Tree Lane, and so I see on the agenda you have it. I'm not going to talk at that one, so I'll just say here, that the Friends supports the closing of the library early that day, and we will be selling books out there as part of that whole Christmas Tree Lane program. One of the things we sponsor is the volunteer dinner, and so that's being set by Uni right now. I think it's November 15th or something. So it's always nice that that the recognition of whether it's foundation or friends or the volunteers that come in either through the high schools or the adults that come in and help Uni in the programs. And so we'll be sponsoring that one on November 15th. And then the last thing is I'm going to just report here and actually say that Cynthia and I collectively from the foundation and the friends are going to be asking through Stella about the idea of maybe either under where your pictures are or something, a little, we talked about this at the foundation retreat, something that lays out what the Board of Trustees of the library board is and does, what the foundation board of directors is and does, and what the friends of the board is and does. And so we will be jointly asking Stella that. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. You might have some ideas on it or some thoughts too, but as soon as she gets it, I don't know if it's something that comes to the board. I don't think it is, but if it is, we're just heading it up ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. All right. So we will launch into the rest of our agenda as it is already formulated. And so that puts us at number 3, public communication. Renee, I guess you can go first.
Thank you. I hadn't intended to start off with this tonight, but we just got a reminder. It's the law that every legislative body in the state of California meet in an accessible location. And it is untenable to me, as someone who's been interested in disability rights for 40 years, that this location isn't. And a member of the public just got to go out through a non-accessible door, a back door of this meeting room. That's just untenable and should be considered to be the greatest, well, there are several, greatest disgrace of this library. That some people have to use the back door or a back door and have help to get into this facility when the law's been on the books for as long as it has. So pardon my anger and outrage. I hadn't expected that. That said, hey, thank you actually, friends and foundation, for a wonderful taste of Dina. I very much enjoyed myself in that evening, and as a result, I wound up with a couple cases of extra wine. I'd like to remind members of the public and the board, you're eligible as well if you'd like to participate in the Guess the September Billings contest that I'm running. Basically, anybody who comes in closest low and closest high, they'll get a bottle of wine from the wine pull. If somebody guesses it exactly right, they'll get a bottle valued at least $100 that I won in the ring toss. And if they come in at under $20,000 for the month, which, heck, up until recently, it's never been that high in Altadena Library history. If it comes in at under $20,000, the offer is that I double the amount of wine I give out to each winner. So there'll be at least 2 winners. And each person will get at least 1 bottle of wine. They'll get their picture taken, put up on nextdoor.com. But I wanted to throw that out there. And again, thank you very much to the foundation for putting on a wonderful show. The other thought here, and I'm sure you're going to hear more about this, is the 99 alleged Brown Act violations. That's to date. There are probably more. Reminds me of the song 99 Bottles of Beer on the Wall, especially when you take one down and pass it around, which is exactly what was going on. And there's got to be a record, and something tells me that the Altadena Library District Board of Trustees and particular members are likely to be well in the running for receiving such an award for shunning the public and the light of day and transparency. And I think, I hate to keep pounding on the negative, but you know, that's absolutely disgraceful. So, Mr. Brushatsky, once again, you are a stain on the community, and you, sir, need to resign. Thank you.
Mr. Burmeyer?
Dale Gronemeyer, attorney for Mindy Katay. Speaking of 99 Brown Act violations, I want to serve each of the board members and Ms. Terrazas with Mindy Katay's second supplemental demand and cease and desist letter concerning Brown Act violations at this time. Mr. Brushatsky, Ms. Khan, and Ms. Terrazas. So violations 97, 98, and 99, which are added to the 96 previous violations by this document I've just served on you, result from Ms. Wood, who's sitting over here in the second row to the left, on your behalf, producing 8 documents that should have been, most of which should have been produced 6 months and 10 days ago, but produced last Thursday. And out of 8 documents, there are 3 Brown Act violations. You're going to, I assume, talk to Ms. Wood in closed session today, and I would urge you to ask her why these documents were held back for 6 months, 10 days, or some, in the case of some shorter time. I'm sorry that Trustee McMullins is not here, because each of the 3 violations involved in one way or another Ms. McMullins. Violation number 97 involves Mr. McDonald, Mr. Zambrano, and Ms. McMullins surreptitiously dealing with Dave Herman in order to attack Ms. Katay. A series of deliberations because it involved 3 board members which violate the Brown Act. Violation number 98 involves Mr. Brushatsky and ex-trustee McDonald trying to figure out how to control Ms. McMullins because Ms. McMullin was objecting to Mr. Brushatsky's emotional and extreme and disparaging attacks upon Director Katay. And violation number 99 involved Ms. McMullins and 2 other board members circulating and deliberating upon changes to the bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I miss anybody who wanted to do public comment before we move on? All right, then we're going to move on to number 4, personnel appointments. I believe, Renee, you have a comment about that.
Yes, thank you. This involves the promotion to Public Services Director of Mr. Terrazas, which is a convenient thing to do now because it comes into play later. And that has to do with the whole idea that you need to approve this so you can approve something later, and the numbers change and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's important to raise this point right now that until you approve her and all that, she hasn't sort of actually been the Public Services Director. So it has something to do later on with the numbers. Trust me on that. Also, the termination of former library director Mindy Katay. That's the run out of her extended contract. obviously still an issue of concern to the library district. And those are my comments for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we're moving on to number 5.
Thank you. Yes, I didn't manage to download a copy of the board reports. I only quickly saw one back here this evening, but I noticed that, hey, good to see, legal bills. I believe it's category 7200. I may be wrong on that, but showing up on the books at almost $30,000 for the month. And that's great compared to the, I think it was $858 a year earlier. I've never met a drunken sailor, but I hear they tend to spend money profligately. They just kind of throw it around in hopes that they'll have a good time and that it'll cover them. Here, this library board has been throwing away taxpayer money at a rate that would make a drunken sailor shudder. It's amazing how fast you guys are spending our money intended for library programs. Our money that was apparently of concern to Mr. Bershatsky and some of the other board members a year ago, when Mr. Bershatsky and others thought that something funny was going on.
That doesn't apply to you, you can kind of.
And that former library director, Mindy Katay, was up to cahoots and was somehow brainwashing and misleading and deceiving everyone as to the books. So in its wisdom, this board is spending money that could be used to provide library programs, could have been used to that matter in regard, to extend out the former library director's contract, as her attorney had asked simply be the case. And this concerns me and any number of other members of the community who think that, hey, this library board should be focusing on using those scant taxpayer resources allocated to this district for programs, not to pay attorneys. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. So here we are at the body of item 5, the financial reports. Still, I don't know if there's anything you want to highlight or mention. We have the report that you attached from Nicole.
I don't believe so.
Okay. Any comments from us? Harry? No? Okay. Then I'm going to ask for a motion to receive and file these financial reports.
I'll motion that we receive the financial reports.
Okay. A second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Thank you. Okay. All right, we are at number 6, where we adopt the consent calendar. Does anybody need to remove anything from the consent calendar? No? So then I would like to ask for a motion that we approve the consent calendar as listed in the agenda.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
Public
All right, all in favor, pardon me?
Public comment? I have a card in.
Oh, I'm sorry, Renee, please, I lost track of you.
Thank you. And just real quickly to jump back to item 5, I realize I forgot to mention this. The budget, the entire budget, this board approved for legal fees for the entire fiscal year that we are now in was $25,000. You had before you a report that said that in 1 month, this library district spent far above the budget for the entire year. And yet no member among you made any comment whatsoever regarding that. If a member of staff had, for example, a library director, had so egregiously overspent in a category, I would expect every single member here to jump on that library director and say, what are you doing? How can you possibly? What's going on here? Why are we looking at a track record of potentially 10 to 12 times as much as we budgeted, we the board, in our informed decision-making process? And yet none of you care. You sit there like stones. And I find that offensive. But my comment about the departmental monthly reports is to go back to the Taste of Dino, which is in there on one of the pages. And again, say, wow, what a great event that was. And how nice it was to have so many people in the community come out and support the library. And to see, for example, oh, that's right, the former library director who bought 2 tables for that event to help support the library. That was really stunning and heartfelt, I thought, and showed that some in the community are willing to look past the pettiness that goes on here and to support the library itself. So thanks to all again who were part of putting that together. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. So we are back at a vote on accepting the consent calendar. May I have a motion for that?
I'll motion we accept consent calendar.
Thanks, Ira. Moved by Ira, seconded by Terry, all in favor? Thank you. So that means we can skip number 7. So we are down to new business. Item 8A is a request for early closure of the library on the day of the Christmas Tree Lane Winter Festival, December 8th. I believe, Renee, you have a comment about that?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. There's no report for members of the community to look at or become informed about. But I have spoken with former staff members regarding former plans for that day. And it seems like along the way, there were plans to further engage the library in outreach to the community as a result of the Christmas Tree Lane lighting that evening. This is, of course, second Saturday in December, so there will be no program. The library, it sounds like, will be dark. I don't know all the details, but it seems like a missed opportunity, potentially, again, since there's no report, a missed opportunity for the library to turn outwards towards the community. As some may be aware, last year I believe there were 7,500 participants for the lighting ceremony. This year they're actually going to close down more and extend outwards and all the rest, with the anticipation that the crowds will be substantially larger. So again, the idea of the library being dark to, let's say, 10,000 constituents seems like a lost opportunity. So those are my comments on 8A. I do have a card in for 8B. Thank you.
Could you just fill us in on that plan?
Yes, so actually Renee touched a bit upon why we're proposing that we close at 2. Currently, we do have approval to close at 4 based upon the Board of Trustees calendar approved last year. Since the calendar was approved, Christmas Tree Lane Association has actually expanded their plans for this year. There's going to be greater activity taking place, and it is my understanding that last year, almost to closing time, it got a little bit uncomfortable, or that's not quite the right word. It became a little bit almost unmanageable here in the library with the volume of traffic. I've spoken to staff that worked that day last year, so that is why I'm proposing that we do close at 2 based upon the greater activity that will be taking place with the winter festivities for the community. And in terms of staff, it is my proposal that any staff who normally would work till 6 would be able to do so and continue their full day.
With the library closed?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I appreciate, getting that feedback from the staff and learning from experience last year and making a wise decision this year based on those things. So, any more discussion among us about that? Okay, I'm prepared to ask for a motion that we approve the early closure at 2 p.m. on December 8th.
All motion, we approve the early closure at 2 p.m. on December 8th.
Okay, moved
I'll
by
second that. Betsy.
Ira, seconded by Terry. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Mark, you wanted to comment on 8B, compensation adjustment for the interim director.
So one, I think it's well-deserved, and I think that this time the process of knowing that you were putting somebody at the first step, you know, compared to the confusion we had a little bit with Ryan, I think it makes it a whole lot smoother. That's one. The second thing is and I haven't talked to Renee, I wasn't quite sure exactly what the issue is, or what he was trying to bring up, but I'm assuming that the report out that Stella got appointed on September 10th is that that's the permanent position of the public service director, regardless of what happens going forward. And so you might want to clarify, but I think that's what that item was, so I wasn't quite sure what Renee was talking about there. But I do need to say that I missed during my Friends of the Altadena Library to say that Stella and her staff are helping us this Wednesday because we're using this community room, although we might have to go upstairs depending on the crowd, but we do have the candidates forum for the Board of Trustees election. And so I do want to take this opportunity to invite anybody that might be watching this or listening later on that this Wednesday at 6:30 here in the library, the Friends of the Altadena Library is hosting a candidates forum. And last thing I want to say is under the financial reports, again, it's a tough one because you're over budget by $4,900 right now in the legal fees, understanding that. I think we all know that the legal fees are going to go up a whole lot higher, and so I just know that one of the first things, Stella, for you to be working on is the adjustment. You know, there's a budget adjustment that's done somewhere between December, January, or February. You know, you might consider at least a smaller adjustment being done ahead of time and not waiting all the way to February. So there's a lot of different ways to deal with it, but I think everybody knows that there's going to be an adjustment to that line item, and I think we just should all just realize that going forward. Thank you.
Renee?
Yes, thank you. So this would be on 8B, the compensation adjustment for the interim district director. Two thoughts here. One, and it relates back to, as Mark, who, and I have not spoken with Mark either, we're not joined at the hip, folks, but here we have a situation where a very talented individual has been sort of double jump field promoted. You know, in the military, your commanding officer gets killed. If you're the next one down, you get promoted. If two people get killed, the next person down gets promoted. Here we've had someone who, very talented, and no disrespect or aspersions cast, was I'm not sure of the job title, let's say, new materials intake chair, for lack of a better term, who then became public services director, who is now becoming the interim director, or acting director. Oh, it is interim, not acting. So now we have a title. We have a title of interim district director. And that individual has not only been promoted twice in the last 6 months, that individual has seen a substantial pay increase in the last 6 months. Again, no aspersions whatsoever or questioning of that individual's talent. But we have lost an extremely talented library director, who many would call visionary, many would call undercompensated. And now we have an individual who will be not only the public services director, but the the interim director, without having gone through a vetting process. The public services director position was not flown. Stella kind of fell into that by necessity. This interim district director position was not flown. So Stella has fallen into that, again, 2 steps up. We've lost our visionary director, and that should be, I believe, of concern to everyone here. So hopefully in an upcoming item on the agenda, you all will inform us of what steps you have taken in private, outside of the public eye, to address this situation, to ensure that the most talented individuals possible. Oh, I know where I was headed with this too. There was concern about, in one of these recently released emails, a board member said that he indicated that saying that the board was doing a piss poor job, he thought that was defamatory and shouldn't be said up here. Well, the board has done a piss poor job.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Okay, first I want to just clarify some titles, because this I learned. The difference between an acting director and an interim director is that an acting director is acting when a position is held by someone, and when that position becomes vacant, the person who is acting in that position becomes the interim director. So that is why Stella's title changed from acting to interim. And so what we're asking for in this action item is to adjust her compensation accordingly. She does now have a permanent position that was, the process of which was fulfilled when Ryan Roy was still here as the acting director, and wanting to fill the vacancy left by him moving on to a different district. So what we're asking for now is that Stella's compensation match the job that she's currently doing, which is, for the time being, interim director of the library. So on page 35 of your packet, if you're following along, is the report that Nicole prepared, just laying out the history of how this came to be, and that we are increasing her compensation from her permanent position, step 1, to the district director, step 1. And that will be in place as long as she is fulfilling this role. So with that, I don't know that there's any discussion about it, is there? No. I think, I would just like to back up and thank Stella for agreeing to help the district in this way, and we're happy to have the opportunity to translate that into the compensation that comes along with that extra responsibility. So with that, I'm going to ask for a motion that we approve the personnel action to increase Stella Terras's compensation from Public Services Director Step 1 to District Director Step 1.
I motion that we increase her compensation from, what was that? Can you repeat that?
From Public Services
From Public
Director
Services
Step
Director,
1
Step 1,
to District Director Step 1.
to District Director Step 1.
And a second.
I second that.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye, raise your hand. It passes. Okay.
Good job, Stella, you're doing a great job with all this pressure.
So with that, we will be about to go in closed session, but not yet, because we have a couple more pieces of public comment before we do. Just to change it up a little, Mr. Grummermeyer, why don't you go first this time?
This just gave me more time. I hit the wrong button.
It's okay, I'll spot you.
this item is a closed session item on Director Katay's lawsuit. And the existing lawsuit is a lawsuit concerning Brown Act violations and Public Records Act violations. Director Katay has not yet filed a litigation seeking damages, although she has filed government code claims that are precursors to such a lawsuit. Talking about the existing litigation, I want to go a little further about the documents that are attached to the second supplemental demand and cease and desist letter that I served the board upon earlier. As I indicated, those are 8 documents, and they are in response to a request for emails in the private email account of former trustee John McDonald. Now, you may recall that Mr. McDonald, that the initial Public Records Act request that I filed on Director Katay's behalf was because we had learned that Director McDonald had tried to permanently destroy emails once he got a public records request from Mark Mariscal. So what we have subsequently gotten is not what we asked for with a request for emails from only Mr. McDonald's private email account. What we got was more than 1,600 documents from the library's account, completely unresponsive. And finally, on Thursday, we got 8 documents from Mr. McDonald's private account. Those clearly are from his private account. None of the others were. Now, what happened to the thousands of other documents that were on Mr. McDonald's computer? One, maybe he threw his computer in the river and they don't exist any longer. That's one possibility. A second possibility is that he did what he tried to do earlier, and that is he tried to permanently destroy them. But as I've communicated before, unless you do a Department of Defense scrub, you cannot take documents off of a server. And the third possibility, and the one that I believe that exists, is that Mr. McDonald is simply thumbing his nose. And your lawyer is representing Mr. McDonald with an inherent conflict of interest, and you're stuck with representing him with his suppression of evidence.
Thank you. Renee, would you mind just checking that for me? It's yours.
Thank you. So, there we go. Thank you. So yes, this is Katay v. Altadena Library District, as Mr. Gronemeyer indicated. This has to do with the Brown Act violations, the Public Records Act issues. And he didn't mention, and I think it's important once again to point out, you know, there are elements of the Brown Act that are actually criminal. It turns out, and you can't just say that isn't the case, they are. It's a misdemeanor if you try to, you violate the Brown Act with the idea of trying to keep information from the public. And this board met back last year in an effort to keep information from the public and violated the Brown Act in so doing, yada, yada. That's criminal behavior. That's criminal behavior that apparently lawyers for Best and Krieger are being paid to come up with a defense for board members. And I understand the delicate situation that members of staff, certainly, who want to keep their jobs, and board members may feel about that. But members of the public should not be paying criminal defense attorneys for miscreant, rogue Altadena Library District board members. So once again, please take that into consideration as you go into closed session and speak with your attorneys. Additionally, Mr. Gronemeyer didn't mention, maybe he intended to, but it's now public knowledge that the Library District wants Mindy to never come back. That's been reported in the press and, of course, on Nextdoor.com. They're trying to work the numbers down. There's been no discussion of exactly where the 500, 600, whatever it's going to wind up being, $100,000 paid to Ms. Kate for damages would come from. But I think it's important that at some point the library talk about that. Members of the community have a right to know how much of that might be coming out of the library budget. If it's going to be all of it, if some portion or all of it is going to come from SDRMA, the district's liability insurance carrier, whether there will be a reimbursement of fees from for Best and Krieger from SDRMA, how all that's going to work out. There's no reason there can't be a board report on that to make that information clear and accessible to members of the public. Because some of us are more than just a little bit concerned that individuals, again, on the board will wind up with their criminal defense fees paid by this library. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that brings us to item 9, our closed session. It's 5:45. We will, probably should go to your office, I guess. So we will adjourn upstairs for this portion of the meeting and try to let you know if we see you around when we're done and ready to come back into open session. So I'm going to adjourn us out of open session now at 5:45 and we'll see you in a while. Calling us back in session at 7:21. So we're at that was item 10, 11. There is no reportable action from our closed session. Renee, I believe you want to comment on 12.
Yes, please. This is old business, the update from the little ad hoc subcommittee about... Okay, now I am confused. Filling the interim district director position that you filled earlier this evening, because we now have an interim district director. But that said, because you all decided to keep this from the public and not allow the public to participate, add their wisdom, or understand anything of what you were doing, hopefully the process will be completely transparent from here on out. And you'll have a report that, since we don't have one, for members of the public to look at, that could have been in the board packet, but isn't. Hopefully you all will provide lots of information to members of the public so that we can provide informed comment on this process. Unless, of course, members of the public are of no concern to you. But if you're going to take action tonight on something without informed public comment, seems like you're doing yet another disservice to the community that you're supposed to be serving. So hopefully you've got lots of information for us now in a report form that we can take home and digest. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. So here we are at item 12, and it is the update from the ad hoc subcommittee. That would be myself and Terry Andrews. First of all, I'd just like to say that normally best practice in personnel matters are that they are, by and large, in the process, through their process, they're by and large confidential for the protection of the people who might be interested in applying for positions. So we have no qualms about the way that we're going about our process. First of all, before I say anything else, I would like to express gratitude once again to Stella for stepping into the interim role in the unexpected event, at least until we found out about it, that Ryan Roy, who was in our acting role for so long, found another position, and we needed to have leadership at the library right away, and she helped with that. Many of you who have been regular attendees at our meeting remember a while back that members of the community approached us with the idea that we explore a longer-term interim role, which Terry and I offered to explore, and that is what we have been doing. So what I'm able to report to you tonight is that we have interviewed several candidates for a longer-term interim kind of role. It's only just since the end of September that our director position is vacant, as you know. So this is in kind of preparation for a longer-term search for a permanent director. We are seeking clarification from both our legal team and from the public employee retirement system about sort of the proper status of hiring a temporary interim director, especially one who might be retired, because there are some requirements and some guidelines that we have to follow if someone who might be interested in a temporary interim position is coming to us from an active retirement status. So we're trying to figure out the ins and outs of how to make that work. And we are still in that process. So we will continue to figure that out. And I assure you that although we are following this best practice of personnel search in a confidential manner, when the time comes that we have completed that process, we will let you know what we can let you know. So that is all that I want to say. Terry, if you'd like to add anything, please do.
No, I think you summed it up pretty nicely. I can't say that we've met several times. Every one of our meetings has been productive. We feel like we're moving things forward. And the issues that Betsy talked about, we're working through those now.
Thank you. Since we moved our support group report, we're going to move on to reports of trustees, number 14. Anybody have anything to say at this point?
I do. Terry?
Make sure your microphone is on.
I will say just real quickly, Cynthia Carmona, who was here earlier, talked about the meeting that we had with the retreat with the Altadena Library Foundation. And I was welcomed to that meeting by a very exuberant group of mostly new volunteers that are on the board, and it was one of those meetings that made me realize this is why I wanted to get involved with the Board of Trustees, was to try to do that type of business. We covered a lot. Brian Geary did a terrific job of moderating things, and there was quite a spark in the room. I just wanted to report that, and everybody went away very energized about future events that they'd like to hold and progress in the coming year. That's all.
Thank you. Ira?
Yeah, I wanted to share some background on how I became a trustee and dispel the false narrative about me that is out there and share the truth with you. I've been a patron of the library since 2005. In 2010, I was asked to be on the Altadena Library Foundation Board, which had recently been formed, and where I became finance chair. I implemented financial policies that saved the foundation money and worked on improving the bylaws. In October 2016, I was appointed to the Altadena Library Board of Trustees. Prior to being appointed, for 18 months, I attended almost every Board of Trustees meeting and almost every Friends of the Altadena Library Board meeting, giving me vast knowledge of how each group operated. I thought being selected to the Board of Trustees was the pinnacle. A month later, I became president of the Altadena Library Board of Trustees. This was the pinnacle. What many do not know is that the president of the Board of Trustees is the top person in the organization chart of the library. The Board of Trustees is at the top, and the library director is underneath the Board of Trustees. I want to talk about my accomplishments as board president. In December 2016, the holiday library video was being prepared, and I was asked to review and make comments. The text said that the library was a diverse place. I'm a big proponent of diversity and not a fan of the word diverse. Over time, it has lost its meaning and can be interpreted in many ways.
Excuse me, this sounds like a political.
It's not.
I'm going to ask for,
I'm sorry,
well,
that's what it
this is a
sounds like.
time for board comments, and a board member has First Amendment rights to make comments. So I'm gonna ask
Isn't that First
for,
Amendment right to
I'm
use
gonna
a
ask
public
for the
forum to
room
run for
to
office?
give him his moment to speak, please.
Over time, it has lost its meaning and can be interpreted in many ways, as is the word inclusive. I chose the word welcoming instead, and the patron feedback was positive. One patron said, yes, the library is a welcoming place. In fact, our operating plan describes being a welcoming place to be a goal of the library. On more than one occasion at monthly trustee meetings, I said that the library is a welcoming place, and that when you enter the library, you're not asked what your last name is or who your parents are. The Oh Happy Days Cafe on Lake has a sign on the door that says all are welcome. Maybe the library can have a sign on our door that says that. Next up was the Phase 1 renovation of the main library. The HUD grant was running out toward the end of 2017, and we had $320,000 in funds that had to be used. At the January 2017 trustee meeting, Mindy provided us with documentation about the costs and process of the renovation, and she said we had to decide right away. The documentation was incomplete, and I said to come back with more detailed documentation. A month later, the wonderful staff of this library came back with complete and detailed documentation about the renovation and the closure of the main library for 6 weeks and how the branch would fill in the gap. We approved the renovation plan unanimously.
Public time. This
With
is
additional
Mr. Rohrmeyer,
funds.
you may not
Point of
speak
order.
right
This is
now. You
improper.
may not speak right now,
This is
sir. You
improper.
may not speak right now, sir.
I'm not speaking, I'm raising a point of
I'm
order.
With additional
adjourn
funds.
the
And
meeting
your
if you-
response-
I'm
your
sorry,
response is to overrule the point of order.
Excuse me.
Overrule the point of order and I'll stop.
I-
But rule on it. My point of order is he
I'm trying
can't
to-
electioneer.
I am recessing this meeting. I'm recessing this meeting briefly until order can be restored to this room. All right, excuse me. I am going to bring us back into session. I am going to overrule your point of order. I am going to allow Ira to finish his statement. And if there is disruption in the room, I will ask anyone who disrupts to leave, and then we will finish. So that's what we're gonna do. Ira, you may continue.
Next up was the phase, I'm going to repeat just that last 2 paragraphs. Next up was the Phase 1 renovation of the main library. The HUD grant was running out toward the end of 2017, and we had $320,000 in funds that had to be used. At the January 2017 trustee meeting, Mindy provided us with documentation about the costs and process of the renovation, and she said we had to decide right away. The documentation was incomplete, and I said to come back with more detailed documentation. A month later, the wonderful staff of this library came back with complete and detailed documentation about the renovation and the closure of the main library for 6 weeks and how the branch would fill in the gap. We approved the renovation plan unanimously. With additional funds provided by the foundation and funds from the capital fund of the library, the total expenditure was over $500,000, the largest expenditure of the district since the building was built. Being a hands-on person and board president, I wanted to stay current on how the renovation was going. I stopped at the main library several times a week, and Jonathan, who was overseeing the renovation, explained to me the process, what was being done, and kept me up to date on the progress. I visited the branch on several occasions, and the staff there was doing a great job. Once the renovation was completed, over 70,000 books had to be returned to the shelves. The call went out to the community by Stella, the circulation manager, to help reshelf the books. I answered that call. I spent several hours putting the teen anime books in order, then did the same for other sections of the books. One of the duties of a trustee is community outreach. While board president, and after that, I attended almost every second Saturday concert and introduced myself to patrons and asked how I could be of assistance. To this day, when it is appropriate, I do that when I am in the library and out in public. I participated in the Community Conversations meeting in April 2017 at Farnsworth Park and the introduction orientation meeting for library staff and volunteers. As board president, I was able to write a piece for the 2016-2017 annual report. The library director does too. Since she did a review of what had occurred over the last year, I saw this as the space to write who the Board of Trustees are and what we do. This was a way to inform the public that the board does overall personnel policies, gives input to and approves the strategic and operating plan and annual budget, and supervises the library director, among other responsibilities. We do not do programming or participate in the day-to-day running of the library. Before I take an action or make a decision, I do as much research as I can to become informed on the topic. Upon becoming board president, I wanted to take action to reduce the length of the monthly Board of Trustees meetings. They were lasting from 2 to 3 hours and longer. I researched how long board meetings had been over the last several years and found that they were 60 to 90 minutes. The time of the meetings was changed to 5 o'clock from 6 o'clock, not to reduce public participation, but so the trustees could enjoy dinner with their families. I did further research and found that other libraries in the area that were our size or much larger, including the City of Pasadena and the Palos Verdes Library District, which is a special district, had 60 to 90 minute monthly board meetings. I've been told that 60 to 90 minutes is the industry standard. Despite my best efforts, the meetings were never reduced to 60 to 90 minutes. As part of setting personnel policies, we approved the COLA, or cost of living increase, and staff health and pension benefits. As board president, I made sure that staff received the maximum benefits we could approve and that they had the support of the trustees. In one particular instance, the outsourced HR company wanted to change the pay dates for payroll from the 15th and 30th of the month to the 10th and 25th of the month. In my work, I get paid on the 15th and 30th. A few years ago, I worked for a company that changed from the 15th and 30th to the 10th and 25th. It created havoc with my monthly cash flow and timing of when I paid my monthly bills. The Board of Trustees rejected the change, and the staff now gets paid on a rolling 2-week schedule. While I was board president, few members of the public attended our monthly meetings. For reasons known only to them, a year ago October, this room started to fill up with members of the public. I look back at the time when I was board president and public participation was less, and consider it a lost opportunity for the library and the community to benefit from the positive input that these patrons could have provided. Over the last year, my name has been dragged through the mud with false statements. These statements have been parroted by the media, certain members of the public at these meetings, and on the internet to get me to resign. Typical of these statements is an accusation that the Board of Trustees at that time had a secret meeting on September 20th, 2017. If you're going to tell a lie, do your research first. September 20th, 2017 was Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and there is no way a meeting would have been scheduled on that day, and definitely not a secret meeting. Once this is all sorted out, you, the public, the media, and the internet posters will realize you've been hoodwinked, lied to, and used. I appreciate that I was able to share this part of my story with you, and that you will take this into consideration when listening or reading about what is currently going on at the library.
Thank you, Ira. Renee, you're back. Would you like to comment on 15A, agenda items for future agendas?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I'm sure this is going to be a busy item with all of you having 3 or 4 items that you're going to recommend be added to the agenda in the next meeting, only because this library district faces so many important challenges. And, 9 months ago, I raised the issue of the 7 Ps mentioned earlier, that one board member took extreme umbrage towards. At least the public records show that, not some recreation of history that some might feel appropriate. But 7 Ps, proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. That's very important because, as I say, this library has many challenges, and standing still in this day and age means you're actually slipping further behind. We had a forward, outward-looking library district that was moving at near warp speed towards encouraging and improving community feeling towards it, and the weight of goodwill, or the value of goodwill, that's been lost at an accelerating rate. And every day in every way, that continues. And I pointed out several items and opportunities for board members to comment, for, as Mr. Gronemeyer has previously pointed out, for you folks to deliberate in public, to discuss issues in public. So again, I'm just looking forward to the 3 or 4 agenda items that each one of you are going to bring forward, and how crowded the agendas are going to be from now on, because tonight's agenda, tonight's agenda, what did you actually do? You closed the library early, you increased compensation, you met in closed session, didn't do anything, and you gave a 30-second report that you couldn't write out. And that's it. And then you listen to members of the public. That's all that this board could apparently accomplish at this meeting. One of the most important meetings of the 12 now in any given year. That's all you could accomplish. And it floors me that that's the case. So please, let's hear your suggestions for the next agenda. Please, let's hear them. Let the public hear from you. Thank you.
Mr. Barmeyer, you're up.
Dale Grunemeyer again. So I want to suggest that the board agendize for next board meeting a discussion of Trustee Brashovsky's misuse of this forum to electioneer, number one, and to consider whether or not President Kahn should have overruled my objection. Number two, to discuss the significance of Mr. Brashovsky lying in his presentation by claiming that the illegal meeting was in September 20 when in fact it was on August 17, and in fact he participated in that meeting and he knows it, and he's standing up here misrepresenting what the accusation is. And number three, to inquire of Mr. Brashovsky of his sources of information as to the length of library meetings from the Pasadena Library Board. Well, Pasadena doesn't have a library board like this. The Pasadena Library is governed by the board of the city council board. I regularly attend the city council meetings, and there's a rare day that one of those city council meetings doesn't go for at least 4 or 5 hours. That's, if you want to see true deliberation, go to the Pasadena City Council, and you'll see some deliberations. You won't see board members who can't discuss an issue. So I would urge you now Mr. Brashovsky is electioneered tonight at a point where his misrepresentations are right before the election, and there won't be another chance in this forum to rebut them, but at least you have the opportunity to censure him at long last and do something about the stain upon your reputation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With that, I would like a motion to adjourn.
Motion. Terry, you want?
I'll move that we adjourn.
And I second.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Been moved and
Madam Chair,
seconded that
excuse
we
me.
adjourn.
You didn't ask for any board for any agenda items, if they had any.
Thank you, Renee. Any agenda items?
Nope.
So we have a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're adjourned at 7:44.